So, namaste and welcome everyone for this lecture 9 in our series, India, Our Mother, organized by Sri Aurobindo Society as part of our celebrations of 150th year of Sri Aurobindo's birth anniversary and 75th year of India's independence. This series of lectures is being hosted by aurobharati. I'm joined by my colleagues from aurobharati, Ram and Vishwajita, and also some of our volunteers, Preeti, and I just saw Auro Ashish there as well. And welcome to all the participants, and welcome to our speaker, Dr. Shraddha Mohanti from Madhya Pradesh. So we'll get to know a little bit about Shraddha in her formal introduction, but I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about the topic, which is very interesting, and I am particularly looking forward to it. So one of the interesting details about today's topic is that this is the second lecture in our series that we are having about the women of Mahabharata. We had first one by Dr. Gitesh Nirban on Shakuntala a few months back. And then it is also the second one in our theme on appreciation of Sri Aurobindo's poetry with a specific theme in mind. We had one earlier by Dr. Charan Singh Kedar Khandi, and his topic was also on Veer Rasa in Savitri. And so today's topic, love and heroism in Sri Aurobindo's narrative poems with specific examples of Ulopie and Chitrangada, fits in beautifully with those series of lectures that the series of themes that we've been exploring. Interestingly, I'm reminded of what Sri Aurobindo once said, that it's love and courage. These are the two qualities that will yet save the soul, even if all else is lost. And our speaker today, joining us from Indore, Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Shraddha Gour Mohanti, will be sharing about how love and heroism, as these two themes, are represented in these two poems. So let me just speak a little bit about the significance of these poems and the significance of this theme as well. So as our, most people who are acquainted with the work and life of Sri Aurobindo know that during his Baroda period, he immersed himself into a deep study of Indian culture. And sort of like we can say that as his guides and companions, he took Vyasa, Valmiki, and Kalidas along with him. And incidentally, in our current issue of Renaissance, starting with this current issue, actually, for next several issues, we are featuring a series of articles written by Prema Nandkumarji in mid-1980s. And her theme was on Sri Aurobindo's interpretation and appreciation of these two itihasas, Ramayana and Mahabharata. And in one of these articles, she reminds that as over time, these legends, these stories of various characters from Mahabharata have been retold and reinterpreted and rethought many, many times by different poets and kathavachaks and scholars and interpreters, that often what happens is that a lot of meaning, real, true meaning, the truth and beauty of these legends either gets lost or it gets covered up by these layers. And Sri Aurobindo was acutely aware of that. In fact, if we see one of his letters that he had written to his brother Manmohan Ghosh, the poet, to whom actually he wanted to dedicate another poem that he was writing at the time based on another two characters from Mahabharata. The poem is titled Love and Death. He wanted to dedicate that poem to his brother, and in that letter he says something beautifully about how legends from Mahabharata should be retold. And I'll just quote him. He said that to take with a reverent hand the old myths and cleanse them of soiling accretions till they shine some of the antique strength, simplicity, and solemn depth of beautiful meaning is an ambition which Hindu poets of today may and do worthily cherish. So that's the work of poets and storytellers and interpreters, those who try to bring these characters and legends from our old itihasas for our modern mind, for our modern audiences. And Sri Aurobindo he did do that in many of the poems that he wrote based on characters from Mahabharata. We have the tale of Nala and, of course, Ulopie and Chitrangada, about which we will hear today. And then, of course, his love and poem on Ruru and Ramadwara. And of course, we have the mantric poem Savitri itself. So it's interesting that we find that he's drawn to particularly women in the Mahabharata. What was that he was finding in these women characters? And Prema Nandkumarji again says something very insightful there when she says that in these heroines, in these women, Sri Aurobindo somehow could see the reflection of some saving grace of the divine, and that faith, that that grace as reflected through the life and work of these women will be helping humanity to move forward. And so he was also drawn to, according to her analysis, these women, because these are the women who never shed tears, even in the direst extremities. And Chitrangada, Uloupie, Vasavdatta, and several others. And of course, as I said, heroines as Savitri. So with this background, I think I'm really looking forward to what Shraddha ji has to share with us about these two poems and how love and heroism gets reflected in their, in these poems. But before we do that, let me invite Ram to briefly introduce Dr. Shraddha Gour Mohanti, and then we'll take it up from there.
Thank you, Belluji. So good morning, everyone. And I'm happy to introduce Dr. Shraddha today. So Dr. Shraddha Gour Mohanti completed her graduation in computer science and then went on to do post-graduation, MPhil and doctorate in English literature. The topic of her MPhil research was the study of transcendentalism in the poetry of Sri Aurobindo. And she is presently working as principal at a reputed CBSE school in Indore. She has more than a decade's experience of teaching English to the students of classes 10 to 12. And growing up in a family of devotees and followers of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, Dr. Shraddha has always been drawn to their writings. Her specific areas of interest include Sri Aurobindo's poetry, integral philosophy, yoga, and education. So some of her writings have been published in various journals and magazines like New Race and also our Renaissance. And I still remember her article on progress, which was very simple yet powerful for the youth. And she also conducts seminars for students on different teenage related issues. She enjoys guiding teachers and mentors on application of higher ideals of futuristic education. So we are looking forward to listen to you, Dr. Shraddha. So welcome you for today's talk, and please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ram. Yes, Shraddha, please, it's all yours now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Belluji. I would take this privilege of calling you Belluji. I am fortunate that I am calling you in this manner. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. I have been a student of the poetry of Sri Aurobindo since my school days, and I was drawn towards the poetry. And when we had a discussion, I decided that let us talk about two poems of Sri Aurobindo about which much has not been discussed and written. So these two poems are Ulopie and Chitrangada. So I would begin with these. I have chosen love and heroism as the two topics or two aspects from this poetry, though it is very clear that whatever literature is of Sri Aurobindo, it can be studied from vivid aspects and varied different kinds of philosophies can be applied. We can also understand the literature from a spiritual point of view, or from purely practical point of view, or philosophical point of view. When I study the poems, the spiritual point of view, since I am a devotee of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, so that comes in front. So I could understand that love and heroism, that two things are very clearly visible in both the poems. I would like to share the screen. So Sri Aurobindo spent at least 13 years in the Baroda service from year 1893 to 1906. And these years can be considered as the years of self-culture and literary activity. And much of his poetry that was published afterwards from Pondicherry actually belongs to this period. While he was in England, as we all know, he got well versed in European, Greek, Latin literatures. But when he came to India, he again started reading. He first of all he started learning different languages, starting from Sanskrit, Hindi, Gujarati, Bengali. He also assimilated the spirit of Indian civilization and its different forms. And we all know that the variety of inspiration which he got during this period resulted into his translation of Upanishads and Vedas and Bengali and Sanskrit literature. And then he came out as a mature poet. So these are the poems that were written during this period, and they reveal his appreciation of all the Indian epics as well as languages. Apart from this, he was having interest in Indian mythology and scriptures. He was more connected and attracted towards Ramayana, and in his future poetry, he also wrote about Saint Valmiki. But we find that in his work, he talks about the characters of Mahabharata. These characters he uses as symbols to convey the ideals and the ideologies that these characters carried at that period, and few of these things are still relevant in today's era. So from the screen, you can see my these two poems basically are based on the Mahabharata period. So I would like to talk about them a bit. In the Mahabharata, in Adi Parva, in the book 1, chapter 2, there is a description of these characters, Ulopie and Chitrangada. So Ulopie is taken. It is taken from the Arjun Vanvas, that Parva section, and she is told to be the daughter of Naga king Kauravya, and she is also mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana and Vishnu Purana. And Ulupi was a Nag Kanya, and she lived in Patalok, the nether world. And when Arjuna he started his journey, and I think you all must be knowing that uh, Draupadi married all the five Pandavas, and it was told that she has to stay with one of the Pandavas for the time period of a year, and then afterwards she can stay with another Pandava. And during that time period, if she is staying with one Pandava, so in her room, no, in her inner chambers, no other person was allowed to enter. And if that person enters, then he would have to go through a penance. So Arjuna entered her inner chambers while she was with Yudhishthira, and as a penance, he was told to go on exile. And he went on exile for a period of 12 years. And this is his journey, which is traced here with this purple color. If you can see, this journey is traced. He started from Dwarka, and then he started from this Indraprasth, and then he went to the northern and the eastern states, and then he went to Gokarna, Mahendragiri, and then again he came to Dwarka, and from there he returns back. So this journey is traced here, and during this journey he meets with Uloupie and Chitrangada. He marries both of them, and he was already married to Draupadi. Then came Uloupie, Chitrangada, and ultimately when he went to Dwarika, he married Subhadra, and then he comes back. So this journey can also be treated as a journey of a human being and the journey of his consciousness. Because when he comes back, he gathered some different ideals in him that prepared him for fighting for his dharma, his swadharma. So I feel that when Sri Aurobindo wrote these poems, he also took these ideals and he uses the characters as symbols. Yeah. So I would start with the story of Uloupie. As I was telling, that Nagas were thought to be the supernatural beings who become especially strong in water, and they are also thought to be skilled hunters. So Uloupie was a widow, and she got attracted towards Arjuna after seeing him taking bath in the river Ganges, and he used to come there every day. And she expresses her desire to marry Arjuna. And Sri Aurobindo has written Urjuna, uh, because at that time he was assimilating all the cultures, literature, Bengali, and so he wanted that exact pronunciation to come. So instead of A, he uses the alphabet U, Urjuna. So at that time, he just Uloupie asked Urjuna to marry her, and he married her, and he spends time with her, and then out of their union was like came the son Iravan of Ulopie and Arjuna, and Arjuna was not knowing about this son, and Ulopie also gave her a boon that no creature of water could defeat him. And all these things are mentioned in Bhishma Vadha Parva, where Iravan, the son of Ulopie and Arjuna, they was destroyed by the Kuru forces, and previously Ulopie was married to a Naga who was killed by the Garuda, and then Ulopie again remarried Arjuna because she was very distressed and depressed, and she was also overcome by pangs. And Arjuna agreed to this marriage, and then he just spends some one night, it is said, with her, and then he goes on to his journey. And Ulupi felt gratitude towards the agreement, like Arjuna agreed to her proposal. Then he goes to Manipur. Now, this is not the state Manipur. It is a different place, and I would again bring you back to this map, if you can see it here. Yeah. So here you can see this. There is a place, Manipura. It is written. So this Manipura, this place is actually that particular city where Chitrangada used to live, not the state Manipur. So from Nagar, Nagalok, he comes to this place, Manipura, and here he finds the daughter of King Chitravahana, and he was actually attracted towards the heroic qualities of Chitrangada, because she was a warrior princess and she was taking care of the state. And in that state, only the daughters used to take birth, and that is why the king he wanted a son. So he raised Chitrangada as a warrior princess, and she was very tough, very fearless. And this place Manipur is also known as Manadu. So Arjuna got impressed by the war skills and by the charismatic charm and the courage of Chitrangada. And but Chitrangada was not very beautiful as per the standards of beauty. So she was afraid that Arjuna would reject her because of her manly behavior, and she was a warrior. So she prays to Kamadeva to make her more feminine and beautiful. And the story goes that Arjuna fell in love with her and they were married. And when he seeks um, her hand from her father, so Chitrangada's father, Chitrabhana, puts up a condition. And the condition was that since he does not have a heir, so he wants his daughter to stay in his place only after her marriage. And even the child would become the king of Manipur. And Arjuna agrees to this, and he stays there for around 3 years. And then Chitrangada also gave birth to Babruwahana at that time. And they actually loved each other for their qualities. And it also in one of the stories, it is also mentioned that when Chitrangada changes her roop, or she becomes very beautiful at that time, she also regrets it. And due to this self-inflicted hypocrisy, and she conveys everything to Arjuna, but then their love stays very strong. And Chitrangada is actually an unsung hero of Mahabharata, as per me. And even Babru Bahana became one of the greatest warriors of that time. And he also was sent to fight the great battle of Mahabharata by her mother. So these poems of Sri Aurobindo are actually an awakening to the glories, as Beludri has already said, that they are awakening towards the glories of Indian culture and civilization. And the poems also talk about the true dharma of a warrior, the selfless love, heroism, and all the qualities, the divine qualities, which we need to carry and which all the youngsters of our country need to carry within themselves. So these can be called as the poems that are inspired by the India's mythical past and the cultural opulence. And Sri Aurobindo has given his own personal color to these poems. I would like to just touch upon um, his views on poetry. In the future poetry, he says that the mantra or the mantric poetry is possible when there is highest intensity of style, rhythm, and vision. And when all these combine, then we get a poetry that reaches to the heights of mantra. And if we go through the poems of Sri Aurobindo written in different periods, we find that there was an adventure of consciousness in these poems. The poems written in the earlier period and the poems written in the later period, reaching to Savitri, we find that it is not only the change of topics, but also his self growth as a poet. But these poems, both of them, if when I studied these poems, and I also love to read Savitri, I could find some or the other similarity between these poems and Savitri, about which I would also like to discuss. During the Baroda period, Sri Aurobindo's notebook, where he has wrote this manuscript of Uloupie that was seized by the police, and Sri Aurobindo was arrested after that. And later on, it was revised by Sri Aurobindo under the name Chitrangada. So actually, this poem is drawn upon in the writing of Chitrangada. And if you go to the narrative poems, you will find that Chitrangada seems to be incomplete. So this portion of the rough draft was written below some notes, and maybe these notes were dated to May 1901. And when I first I would like to discuss this poem Uloupie. So when the poem starts, we find that Uloupie is a pale and majestic figure, and she is swimming in the Bhagavati river and under the eastern hills in Patalok, or the nether world. And this is the place from where the poem starts. And I would like to read those lines also. Under the high and gloomy hills, the portals of Patala are, and there the Bhogavati with her sinuous waves rises, a river alien to the sun, and often to its strange and gleaming sands, Uloupie came, weary of those dim shades. She was tired of those dim shades since she used to live in the Patalok. And then, after few lines, we directly come to the description of Chitrangada. After one para, one stanza, the same poem turns towards these lines. But in our city, Manipur, mid the eastern hills, Chitrangada awoke and saw the dawn. So here, I think we can understand that Uloupie supplements the Chitrangada. Even if we read both poems, many lines I found to be similar with a change of few words. For example, when Uloupie talks to Arjuna, she gets awake in the early morning time when it is the dawn, and it was not even the morning. We talk about it as Usha Kal. And when she wakes up, she was tethered and she was very disturbed by all the memories that come to her mind, and she realizes that this is the time. This is the time when she must ask Arjuna to leave, because he was not made for these things which he is doing. He was not made for the conjugal marital life. Instead, he was made for some mighty things. So she talks to Arjuna and tells him that the impulse of thy mighty life would come upon thee. like a wind, and it will drive you forth because you are made for is not for these things, but you are made for some high intention, some motive. You have one goal of your life to love and battle and disaster deeds and all the anguish that preserves this world. And the same lines are mentioned in the poem Chitrangada with a few changes of few words. For example, in Uloupie, it is would come, mighty life would come. In Chitrangada, it is will come. Then you can also see the change of to love and battle. Here it is to toil and battle, and all the giant anguish that preserves this world. And in Chitrangada, it's our world. So while making the revision, these changes have come. Apart from that, there is a lot of similarity between both the poems. Now, this poem Chitrangada was written in somewhere between 1907 to 1910, and this actually related in the theme and form to Uloupie. And out of the few passages that were found in a notebook, and this poem was drawn. Chitrangada was drawn from those passages, and that is why the lines are identical. And when Sri Aurobindo left for Bengal, he gave this manuscript to the Karmyogi staff, and it was published in the Karmyogi in the newspapers. And afterwards, it was revised in 1949, and some last poetical lines were composed and added. And when we read that poem, the last lines are totally different from the lines that were in the beginning. And the difference comes in the usage of words, in the intensity of poetry, in the feel that comes, even in the level of consciousness when we go through the starting lines of the poem and the end part. In these both poems, so when I will be talking about these poems and the different aspects, I would like to make it clear that I would be dealing with Ulopie and Chitrangada as one, and I will be putting up and discussing different aspects which I found in these poems. So I found that the characters, they have an unquenchable thirst for liberation, and they are in quest for an ideal. I also remember one of the talks recently given by Dr. Alok Pandey of Pondicherry, where he was talking about Mrinalini Devi, and he says that Mrinalini Devi's life is really a life where she sacrificed her whole life and for the sake of Sri Aurobindo, and Sri Aurobindo married Mrinalini Devi, but their marriage and their union was of a unique type because Sri Aurobindo was constantly remembered. He remembered his aim, and he left Mrinalini Devi, and she used to stay, and he went to Pondicherry, and he used to continuously write letters to her. And if we go through those letters, what is the ideal love that comes in front? Even the mother has written that at its origin, love is the supreme power of attraction which awakens, this power of attraction awakens in response to the irresistible need of an absolute self-giving. So this absolute self-giving, consecration, this surrender, these are the ideals with which Mrinalini Devi led his whole life. And these are the ideals which are touched upon in these poems. Of course, it carries a war theme because in these both poems, Chitrangada prepares Arjuna for the war and inspires him with the war ideals and conveys to him that this is not the time for spending with me. Instead, you should be going towards your Swadharma. You should be following the ideals for which you were born. And Professor K.R. Iyengar, he also talks about this poem and he says that in the poem Chitrangada, Sri Aurobindo has portrayed the warrior woman and the heroic hero. And he also says that he has used the principle of forced antagonism and the fateful attraction. But then there was attraction and repulsion, both in this poem where Chitrangada loves Arjuna so much that, and then too she decides not to stay with him and asks him to leave. So there was no desire, no demand for this love. It was self-giving, giving oneself. And it is said that love is that irresistible power where it removes the sense of individuality, and that is why love was formed. Because sense of ego gives us the sense of individuality, that we are an individual, we are different from others. But love is the power that actually takes over that sense of individuality, and it is made of pure self-giving. And it is such a force, such a supreme power that comes along with all the ideas that can be used and that can be utilized in helping others. And I would like to read the poem, read the lines from Savitri book. It is mentioned in book 10, Canto 3, that love must not cease to live upon the earth. It must not stop, because love is a link between earth and heaven. It is the transcendent angel here. And if it stops, then we would stop, the life would stop. And love that was once an animal desire, Sri Aurobindo expresses, and then a sweet madness in the rapturous heart, and ardent comradeship in the happy mind becomes a wide spiritual yearning space. And this word yearning actually affects me a lot. Yearning, एक जिज्ञासा, जुजुप्सा, and it's an intense desire for surrender, for self-giving. This yearning I could find in this poems. Apart from that, there the purity of vital and mind, where there was vital and mental boldness and courage, which is a sign of soul's nobility. Chitrangada awoke. She saw the early morning, the dawn. She was presaged in the bleakness of the dawn. She waited for some time, and she realizes that this is the time when she should ask Arjuna that the impulse of thy mighty life will come upon thee like a wind and drive thee forth to the higher things. And when Arjuna tells her that a void, a gap will be created if I leave. So she says, how easily that void will soon be filled. And then will thy destiny seek thee. Your destiny will search for you. Thou wilt pass like a great light in heaven and leave behind only a memory of force and fire. So see the beauty of these heart-touching description of love, where she says that you are made for mighty things, not for this. And you will soon feel that the void, the gap is fulfilled, and you will be walking towards fulfilling your own ambition, your dharma for which you were born. So this romantic resonance, this description of love intermixed with courage and heroism is what that attracted me towards both the poems. Because Arjuna is a world conqueror. He has to fight his dharma yudh. And the mother says that heroism is to stand for truth in all circumstances, to do what is the most noble thing to do in a particular situation, and to act from one's highest consciousness. And I could find all these three things. So my hero here in this poem, both poems are actually Chitrangada and Uloupie. For sure, Arjuna was a world conqueror. For these heroic qualities I could find in Chitrangada, and I agree. I feel that their sacrifice was much great. So he was asked that he should always act from the higher level of his consciousness, which makes this poem a love affair with the divine. And here Chitrangada also tells Arjuna that with all myself I loved thee. I did not love you for the sake of physical attraction or mental attraction because I was attracted towards your thoughts, or vital attraction because I felt love and desire and attraction towards you. I was attracted wholly, totally towards you, not as other women do, piecemeal, step by step, reluctantly, but my whole heart. With my whole heart, I am towards you. So her sensual love gets transformed into the spiritual fire. And here I found the similarity between the love of Savitri for Satyavan and love of Chitrangada. She's not caring about herself here. She is trying to arouse the bravery in Arjuna. And it is said as at the beginning, Beludi has also said that if women are given this responsibility to sublimate and fondle human love, then they are the only persons that can change human love to the divine love. And women have this quality of transforming human love and taking it to the heights of divine love. I also found that there was a struggle between love and dharma, because even if Chitrangada wanted Arjuna to stay, but in the heart of her heart, she was knowing that this was the time for him to leave. No lesser occupation can forever keep thee here, she says. That no occupation, not even me, would be able to keep you here forever, because whose terrestrial birth was meant for to fill thy soul with battle and august misfortunes and majestic harm's embrace. So you were not made for this. You were made for august battles, misfortunes, and all the other things. And here, life is not to be staying at a place, but it is a call, an inner call, a journey, and where a person has to resist the temptations, because he or she has to serve a greater cause beyond the sensual ecstasy of love. Now, here I can compare with it with the life of Sri Aurobindo, that when he got this inner call, within a second he left for Pondicherry. He did not listen to anything else. He did not think even twice. He did not put any second thought to it. He directly left. So when this inner call comes, all temptations have to be resisted, because we are meant for serving a greater cause. So through this poem, actually, I felt that Sri Aurobindo leads us step by step towards the discovery. It's a kind of key to the personal transformation and the key to change the face of this world, that consciousness is power. And in these lines also, Chitrangada says, but though I love thee, I have known I was no real part of thy great day. I was not a real part. And then she tells him that this is the time. Hero, take up thy bow. Warrior, arise. You have to proceed with your majestic mission, because you were selected among many mighty spirits, and you cannot renounce your whole life and the anguish and the crown for this transient joy. And she also adds up to it that that maybe they will meet again. This was actually found in the poem Ulopie, where she actually motivated Arjuna for moving towards the highest ideals and to return back. And finally, when it was the day for Arjuna to leave, at that time she was preparing the horses, and she started talking to the horses, and she says that all these things, I am really feeling jealous, because you brought him to me and now you are carrying him away from me. So this is the highest ideal which these characters carry. I found that Uloupie is a very important female character. She is bold, she is outrageous, she is confident, strong. And Chitrangada herself was born and brought up as a son. She was trained in martial arts, horse riding, archery, even political decision making. So these female characters are actually royal queens, warrior lovers, and they are able to take decisive moves. And in this case, in the poems, they take this decisive move of uh, instilling confidence in Arjuna that this is the time for him to go towards the higher ideals and listen to his call. She says that I have planted thee thy wish in my heart, O tender beauty, and shall not lightly lose. Though years divide us, even if the years divide us, but my wish in your heart, my love for you would never end, would never stop. And when Arjuna questions that you asked me to leave, and what would happen? She says that till the end of my life, if I want to remember a moment, then what other thing can I remember till forgetfulness except this? this time which I have spent with you. So love and heroism are intermingled in these poems. So the central idea of Mahabharata was elaborated in the poem. We also find the adventure of consciousness, the evocative power of poetry. These poems were written in blank verse, and the similarity with Savitri. I would also like to take the examples, few examples, and would like to discuss few poetic lines here. Yes. When this discussion was going on, Chitrangada conveys that it's our spirit's fate always to roam, seeking bright portions of ourselves. And we are actually on a journey where we have to seek ourselves. The strong heart cherishes until it flows, and it is not relinquished, it is not satisfied. Nothing grasps who yields to fate, because to fate or weakness, a person, if he yields to, misses the greater call. It is with the frailest flower, helped that blows in frankness. When this conversation was going on between Arjun and Chitrangada in the poem, Arjun tells her, "O woman, O delight, remember to rejoice. Even if I leave, you have to remember that you have to rejoice. Flowers die, beloved, to live again. Therefore, you have to hold fast to the love. Hold fast the blooming of thy life in love, the soul's majestic progress, molding tomb." So even if the soul walks towards its progress, then even doom can be molded. And when the both poems start, there was the description of the time of dawn, and the same dawn is symbolized as the manifestation of new creation. And in Savitri also, we find these lines of symbol dawn at the beginning, where it was mentioned that it was the time when gods are not yet awake, and the mind of night is standing in the way of new creation. And the similar kind of lines I could find in both poems. I would like to read those lines here. The dawn presaged in bleakness, grey and formless, and Arjuna tells to Chitrangada, and also in the poem Uloupie, he conveys that this is the dreadful hour, the hour before early morning, before the sun rises. Chitrangada beheld intending dawn, gazed coldly in, and she understood the call. See the lines, she understood the call. The silent and imperfect pallor passed into her heart, and she grew prescient of grey realities. She was able to understand the grey realities. She was able to realize that this is the call, that she must prepare Arjuna. And when Arjuna talks to her, he says that you must not stay awake at this time. Instead, you should be in my arms, because friendly to mortals is the living sun's brilliant light. It is friendly, and the cheerful noise of the earth when the sun comes up. And instead, you should not be awake at this time, because you would be surrounded by all kinds of sorrow, and all kinds of memories will gather around you, and you will be afraid. But Ulopie and Chitrangada, they just deny all these things, and they talk about the mighty role of the warrior prince towards the humanity, towards his dharma. In these poems, the description of Arjun also somehow correlates his heroism, his qualities correlate with Satyavan. In one of the lines, when Uloupie was talking to Arjun, and she says that when I saw you, and even the same kind of lines are described in the poem Chitrangada, where she says that when I saw you, it dawned upon me. There was an attraction, and your face was like the moon that draw the tides, and you were standing with a bow in hand, and you were leaned on a pillar with a banner's pomp, seeming to mingle thy hair doused to dust, and you were expectant, careless, and thy strong, gracious face was brilliant like a sudden god. In Book 5, Canto 2 of Savitri, when Satyavan was described, he appears against a forest edge, erect and lofty, like a spear of God. So when I read these lines, I could recall those lines where Satyavan was described as a noble, peaceful, beautiful, joyous was his figure. And similarly, here Uloupie, when she was remembering that how she met Arjuna and how she found him to be, and when she describes these lines, so there was a similarity which I could find in both. And then these poems also describe the part of the love of women, as we have started with the same, that no other gender can love as much as deeply as women. Women are to love even though they know pain for the end, yet knowing still must love. These lines, when I was reading these lines in Chitrangada, women are to love even though they know that they have to meet with pain at the end. So Chitrangada and Uloupie, both characters met with pain at the end because they have to allow Arjuna to leave. But yet knowing still must love. They carried on with their love. And if I bring you back to the story of Mahabharata, where it was mentioned that Arjuna does come back. He comes back and he ultimately takes Ulopie and Chitrangada to his palace, and they spend some time over there. So, yet knowing still must love. So, love continues. And here I could also find that when Arjuna conveys this to Chitrangada, that there is only one moment's possibility of love, and you will be regretting if you allow me, if you ask me to leave, because you will have to divorce with this sweet meaning, with this closeness. And he also conveys that now thou speakest sadly, like a mind matured by thought and pain. You are speaking as if you have got a mature mind and your mind is matured by lots of thought and pain. But though I love thee, and Chitrangada replies, yes, I love thee with all my heart, but I was not a real part of your life, and that is why you must leave for your journey. So these all are actually the aspects which I have found in my study of these poems. And I have taken all these aspects in a very brief manner, and I have not gone into much of the details, keeping the limited time in mind. So that is it. Love, heroism, and adventure of consciousness, which I found in these poems, Uloupie and Chitrangada.
All right. Oh, Shraddha ji, you have taken us on this very interesting um, journey into very interesting stories of these two characters. And I'm totally with you. Chitrangada is one of the unsung heroes. In fact, our participants would also know a beautiful ballet was also written by Rabindranath Tagore a few years after Sri Aurobindo wrote Chitrangada. And that's also a very good one-act play for anyone who's interested in knowing more about different ways in which her story has been told and retold. I just was very, I've always liked Chitrangada's story a lot, much more than Uloupie, but I enjoyed the way, you kind of brought us, also gave us that sort of like the history of the composition of these poems. And in fact, I remember reading that the last few lines of Chitrangada were some of the last lines Sri Aurobindo wrote, except for Savitri. It's like 1949 revision that was done for Sri Aurobindo Circle, the annual publication that came out of Sri Aurobindo Society. Sri Aurobindo Ashram at that time. So it's really, the publication history of these poems is also very interesting. So I would, at this point, invite our participants to see if they have any comments, thoughts, or questions for our speaker. So if you have any, please just unmute yourself and feel free. Yes, Bijoy, please go ahead.
Yeah, Shraddha ji, namaste. Thank you very much. Actually, we know Sri Aurobindo's poems are highest level of mantras. And at the beginning, you have explained three things, like highest intensity of style, rhythm, and vision are required for a highest level of mantra. So as we understand, be it love or heroic act, all these three are also essential. So taking many such common threads, you have beautifully explained how Sri Aurobindo's poems depict love and heroism through our eternal epic characters like Chitrangada and Ulopie, and beautifully explained the, with all geographic co-relevance. So thank you very much. Really, it is an enlightening session for me. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Vijay. Anyone else would like to share some thoughts or have any question for Shraddha ji? Okay, in that case, I have not a question, but more like an observation. As you were, you picked out few lines from Chitrangada and also Uloupie. I mean, again, the similarity and kind of like Uloupie's story fuses into Chitrangada's story when we read Uloupie. And I'm saying this because last night I reread them. I wanted to kind of just, have that, my mind and heart full of these two women and these two poems before our session today. But one thing that just struck me today as I was listening to you was the use of the word majestic in the two examples you gave. One was majestic harm's embrace. So even the word harm is qualified with the adjective majestic. That's like Sri Aurobindo, right? And then another thing that you pointed out was soul's majestic progress. So the journey that we are all in, like the adventure of consciousness theme that you picked out, the journey that we are on in our life or in our lifetimes, that progress, that soul's progress, there is a majesty to it, a royalty to it. So I just loved, again, like, that the way when you were reading out those lines, the use of the adjective, that qualifier majestic for these two things. So even the harm that comes to us brings with it a certain majesty because it is eventually taking us to that majestic progress. So I just, wanted to kind of comment on those two things that you pointed out. So thank you so much. Really, it's wonderful to, the more time we read Sri Aurobindo's poem, each and every line, you find that there is not every line can take us into that deep meditation on life, on reality, on so many aspects, so many qualities. So I'm really thankful to you for sharing your, insights on these two poems, which are somewhat kind of like, missed out as like, of course, there is Savitri, and then there are these other incomplete poems that are full of incomplete fragments of his prose writings, even incomplete short stories. His literary output is amazing that way. So that aspect, as we celebrate his life and work in this year, I think that aspect should also be highlighted. So I'm really, really thankful to you, Shraddha ji, for giving us certain insights into this. So let me see if there is any comment in our chat box. Yes, okay, Kedar I think he has already left, but he has left a note. Thank you for conducting sessions like this, and he's appreciative of your session. Are there any other comments or questions? Or if you have any last words, Shraddha ji, in terms of what?
Yeah, I would like to add up one more thing, that the poetry of Sri Aurobindo should actually be added in our syllabus, in our books, because I really would appreciate if our students read these poems. because there is a dire need in today's generation that they must develop these qualities, these noble qualities and virtues in them. And it is very difficult when I take the classes and I inspire them with all these qualities. I think these all things can be well assimilated into oneself only through reading of the poetry of Sri Aurobindo. So if the children, they read these poems, they will be actually getting all those things without being told to them, without lecturing them on these things. So, and the beauty of this poetry, and even the shorter poems, and even if we can pick any of his poems, and when we read, we are as if transported to another level. Even like when I was reading these poems, I was feeling so happy, as if I was surrounded by love. And I don't know from where these feelings came. But while I was also reading, and I have at least read 6 or 7 times these both poems, and I was narrating these lines. So as soon as I was narrating, I felt as if I am being surrounded by a lot of happiness, delight, and it came all of a sudden. So this is the beauty, that without being told, without being, lectured, because nowadays youngsters, they don't like being lectured. If they read these poems, they will be getting these ideals, these qualities. This is these are the last words which I would like to convey. And thank you very much for giving me this chance to express my views on the poems of these both poems of Sri Aurobindo.
Very well said. Very well said, Dr. Shraddha. Really, I mean, instead of preaching these stories, these poetry, and I think there is a beauty in reciting poetry. Of course, that is there, and yet at the same time, in Sri Aurobindo's poetry, you have the force of the truth, the force of his consciousness in each and every word, which has that added advantage to it. So again, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much. If there are no other comments or thoughts, maybe it's also end of the hour, so we can also close. But if there are any comment, I'll just wait for a few seconds in case.
Can I say something, madam?
Yes, please, Dr. Urmila. Yes,
Dr. Urmila Parlikar. I think we met at Pondicherry. Do you
Oh,
remember?
yes. Can we have your video if possible?
Oh, I'm not, absolutely not in a good state. I'm wearing, like
Okay,
home
okay,
clothes.
Okay, that's fine. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yes,
Nice.
I just want to say just a few things I'd like to say. Just summarize what Dr. Shraddha Mohanti has said. I was actually sent over directed to this Zoom video by Dilip only. And I immediately joined also, and I was listening to her. And she has really very beautifully brought out, the transactions, the behavioral transactions that went on, that had been between the characters of Mahabharata in those times. I remember we had Mahabharata and Ramayana in our school times also. In 6th standard, we had Ramayana, and 7th standard, we had Mahabharata. And I really, like she's saying, like Shraddha is saying, I also used to tremendously enjoy, it was like she's saying, the whole world would come alive around you when you're reading those chapters. I absolutely agree with her. I subscribe to her view. I would endorse what she's saying. And Shraddha ji, bahut acha aapne, you have enunciated the whole thing very, very well, It was, for me, it was a revisit to those times, and I'm very grateful to Dilip also, who directed me here. I'm really very grateful. And thank you, Dr. Belumira, also for conducting this sort of video lecture. Thank you very much. I'll see you again.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Urmila. So good you could join. And I'll convey my thanks to Dilip as well. He's really a very good well-wisher of our work. And I think for some time I saw Tuhina also join us in our session. So I hope to see you again, Dr. Urmila, sometime soon in Pondicherry or elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me take a moment to just thank you, Dr. Shraddha Mohanti, for this wonderful session. And we really hope you will continue to collaborate with us in various ventures through your writings, through your research work. I forgot to mention, you've also been doing some voluntary research work for some of our Renaissance themes that we had been exploring. So we appreciate that collaboration, and we look forward to more and more opportunities for you to collaborate with us. Thank you once again, and thank you to all the participants who joined us and those who are catching this on live Facebook. We will be putting the recording out on Society's YouTube channel in the coming days and weeks. So look for that. Thank you once again, and have a good rest of the Sunday. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.